Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome to March at Duncombe House Diaries. Spring hath sprungeth, ladies and gentlemen, and we could not be more excited about it. In today's episode, expect to learn how to save the planet. Look forward to an exclusive tour of our Outbuilding. Discover the insanity of England's traditional Shrovetide football. Let us furnish you with all of our renovation plans for the coming month and find out what I found buried in the garden. Mesdames et messieurs, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us. The pleasure is all ours. Let me start this chapter by thanking each and every one of you for your fantastic name suggestions for this building. They ranged from the sublime to the ridiculous, but every single one was appreciated regardless of whether they made me laugh or cry. For the moment, however, we are still not entirely convinced on the correct nomenclature for this building. So, for the moment, we are going to go with the other one. This building, although small and unassuming in comparison to the main house, and even in many ways to the coach house, holds probably the most secrets and history. I don't need to show you photos or videos of how this building looked when we first bought the house, because it is almost entirely unchanged. We've decided it's finally time to give you all a far more in-depth tour of this anomalous little outhouse and share some of her secrets. As you will recall from our previous videos, the other one is located to the north of our property, opposite the coach house, and has been given the most delightful grey-brown wet dash makeover. She boasts 6 rooms in total, all with their very own character and each with varying utility. Let's start in the washroom. We love the washroom. This room is bursting with history. On top of the obvious fact that this space is a 19th and 20th century hoarder's paradise teeming with century-old books, tools, clothing and furniture, it also has some magnificently archaic features. This is our Belfast sink with not 1, not 2, but 3 taps. This is our patent triplex grate oven, which is in fine fettle. And this is our wash copper, all the rage 100 years ago for cleaning your delicates. And yes, before you ask, the washroom has and will remain to have a mesmerizing red terrazzo marble floor, which naturally we love, love, love. Next door to the washroom, we have what we fondly refer to as our architectural salvage cave. But originally, one assumes, due to the hatch at the rear which feeds onto the drive, that this would have been some form of coal store. For the moment, however, it is a perfect place for us to store our 3 broken lawnmowers, some spare chimney pots, and all other manner of gallimaufry whilst we renovate the main house and decide what to do with it all. Next up, it's time to show you a room that, for the moment at least, is the single most important at Duncombe House. The gardener's lavatory is our only working water closet presently, and as toilets go, I'm sure you will agree that it is quite a spectacular addition. One can only imagine the centuries of rumination which have taken place on this throne. Next door to the toilet, we have an actual coal store. Now, we did actually try burning coal during the winter in our fireplaces, but couldn't really get on with it that well. I'm sure, however, we will find a use for it. Perhaps we will purchase a steam engine. the ground floor rabbit warren finally comes to an end with our very useful tools shed. Recognise these? This is a terribly useful space for keeping all the ancient gardening tools that we have inherited and will never ever use. That's it for the ground floor, but fear not, as the best is most certainly still to come. Let's head back towards the house, up those stone steps, past the fuchsia rigatoni, and upstairs to what we call the billiard room. Why do we call it the billiard room, you ask? Well, it has a billiards table in it. A more apt name for this space, however, might be our own Aladdin's Cave, because this really is where the bulk of the Duncombe House treasure resides. This room actually has a lovely history. One of our dear neighbours, Angela, who very sadly passed away at Christmas time, told us about her experiences here during the war. This room was in fact turned into a classroom and became a miniature makeshift school for all the evacuated children in the area. For the moment, the billiard room is going to remain as you see her. Of course, we will continue each week to pluck another piece of fascinating treasure from her bowels to share with you all on our Treasure Tuesday series, but as the roof in here is fairly sound and we have nowhere else to put all this stuff, she is certainly serving a purpose for the moment. Our plan for the other one, unlike the coach house, which we hope to renovate extensively to make it habitable, is to keep her mainly untouched. She will act as a utility and storage building until such time as we have finished all of our other renovations, at which point we will likely start to give her a makeover as the final piece of our odd little puzzle. As you will have gathered by now, we are still in a state of deep freeze at Duncombe House. Despite spring having sprungeth and the temperature outside the house rising nicely, for reasons I am still not able to understand, it is positively Baltic inside the house. Which is why we have been relying so heavily on our monstrous La Nordica log burner, which we bought from MAC Metalcraft in Yorkshire last year. As you will find out in far more detail later, we will hopefully be starting our new heating installation very shortly, ensuring a toasty winter ahead for both man and beast. But regardless of this, we are still going to need a silly amount of logs. Like I always say, a spring well spent brings a winter of content. And the sooner one gets one's log seasoning, the sooner they will be at that magical 15 to 20% moisture level, which is required to make perfect log burner food. We are extraordinarily fortunate here at Duncombe House to have quite a few trees knocking about. In particular, lots of Fagus sylvatica and Picea sicensis, or beech and Sitka spruce, which some forward-thinking person decided to plant decades ago so that future generations, e.g. us, might harvest them. Now, the second reason that we are very fortunate here at Duncombe House is that the Wunderbar team at Stihl felt it would be a good allocation of their resources to send us all the apparatus we need to fell a tree, process its timber, and monitor its progress. Danke schön. Now, I'm going to talk power tools for a moment here, folks, but bear with me, as this really is quite cool stuff. I've had the same petrol Stihl chainsaw for over a decade, and it has never let me down. However, mixing fuel and starting engines can undeniably feel a touch aggressive and certainly a little noisy. And naturally, where one can avoid using fossil fuels and making loud noises in general, one should certainly try. Enter the Stihl MSA 220C, and the C stands for courageous, which is not only exceptionally easy to use, but is 100% battery powered. No cables, no petrol, no fuss. But if that's still a touch OTT for your personal gardening needs, then check this little number out. It's cute, it's feisty, it's the chihuahua of gardening, the GTA 26. So, first things first, we need to find a tree. And after much deliberation and no small amount of head scratching, Fred and I settled on a delicately proportioned Sitka spruce just across the field from Butler's cottage. Now, before you decide to start chopping down trees willy-nilly, this is, joking aside, a potentially extremely dangerous job, and not one that should be undertaken without the adequate training, of which you will likely be very surprised to know I do actually have. So if you do need a tree felling and you aren't an experienced chainsaw user, absolutely make sure that you get a professional to do the job for you. Now, felling a tree is most certainly the easiest part of this back-breaking process. Once she's down, it's time to sned her up, or, in layman's terms, meticulously remove all the spiky branches. I cannot stress enough the importance of ensuring you wear all the correct PPE and are exceptionally vigilant at this stage, as trees do sometimes have a habit of doing a roly-poly and squishing you in the process. Once she's all cleaned up, we can cross-cut the trunk into nice, manageable lengths, and then lift and lop the smaller sections into log-sized chunks on the sawhorse. Which, incidentally, I spent half an hour putting together myself. Totally incorrectly. Before Freddy turned up, read the instructions, and saved my bacon. The larger stems, which are too unwieldy for the sawhorse, can be sectioned carefully on the ground. Then all that's left to do is to load the bounty into the back of the truck. As always, saving our backs where possible by using these ingenious lifting forks. Let's get these puppies back to the house and the real hard work can begin. This seems like a reasonable moment to address the elephant in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, this is called dressing for the weather you want, not for the weather you have. Now, the reality of splitting logs is not how it looks in the movies. Now, don't get me wrong, splitting nice, dry, unknotted timber can, frankly, be an absolute laugh riot. However, splitting green, knotted, freshly felled spruce is the antithesis of a laugh riot. Jazzy gallantly stepped forward to take the first swing, but it became evident almost immediately that although she has myriad talents, log splitting isn't one of them. And in all fairness, it has nothing to do with gender or ability. It's just simple physics. Preposterously heavy people, like myself, make good log splitters. So, after much sweating and no small amount of profanity, our dear friend Sam Brown and I swung and swung and swung until the logs were piled high. Finally, it was time to stack our fibrous gold in this lovely little wind and sun trap to cook away all summer. Now, you're probably thinking, that looks a touch convoluted. However, in England, we call this jobs for the boys. Now, spruce generally will dry quicker than harder woods, but they still have a long way to go before they're ready to burn. So, when it comes to next winter, and we're freezing once more, we will simply pop back out and check them again with this nifty piece of kit, until they are baked to perfection. I'm sure you will agree it's frankly staggering how few logs come out of a tree, albeit a little tree. And with our log burner being the size of a small car, this lot will realistically only last about a week. Which means only one thing: more splitting and more stacking. In the meantime, however, let me introduce you to the Queen of Kindling, who, after not 100% warming to the splitting axe, most certainly has found her spirit animal in the GTA 26. The joy on that face. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've told you all quite how much Jazzy and I enjoy hunting for treasures. There is just something so beautifully primal about unearthing the arcane secrets of history. So you will be able to imagine just how excited I was for my new magnet fishing set to arrive. As everyone knows, metal detecting is the gateway drug into magnet fishing. So, as an avid detectorist, it was only a matter of time before I started swinging the rare earths around. Now feels like an excellent opportunity to introduce you to my friend Blythe. He's actually called Jack Blythe, but to avoid confusion, we'll stick with his patronymic. I have known Blythe since he was 11, and we are both obsessed with history. After introducing him to the extreme sport of metal detecting some years ago, he quickly became addicted to the adrenaline, and has far surpassed me both in his knowledge of metallurgy and skill with a treasure wand. So he was the perfect person to be the Samwise to my Frodo and join me on an epic adventure back in time. Now, it's no exaggeration to say that the night before our inaugural magnet fishing trip, I genuinely struggled to get to sleep with excitement. I purchased 2 magnet fishing kits from Amazon, and despite knowing nothing at all about the hobby, I was reassuringly impressed with the kits. The weather was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold, and running on 100% Arabica beans and optimism, we began to swing. Even Quincy was getting quite overwhelmed at the thought of what we might pull up. I wound up for my first swing and prepared myself for the bounty to come, the weight of the magnet in my hand feeling like the weight of history itself. Finally, I loosed my bow of burning gold directly into the tree. An inauspicious start, I thought. However, the day was still so young. So, after recovering my kit from the tree, the two of us swung and swung and swung. I genuinely, hand on heart, thought that our biggest issue was going to be that we would be pulling up too many items from the depth. But in the end, after hours of persistence, we sadly found nothing. Not nothing of value, actually nothing at all. If there are any experienced magnet anglers watching that can find some detrimental fault in our style or technique that would explain this, please do comment below, because we were dumbfounded at our failure. At least the view was acceptable. Not ones to be easily perturbed, however, we wandered back to the truck, got kitted up, and went out to try our luck with the detectors. Now, metal detecting is one of those extreme sports that has its ups and its downs, and is also deeply rooted in superstition and mystery. On this day, we actually made a find that was, for us at least, a genuine once-in-a-lifetime treasure event. Before I show you the actual treasure we found, however, I feel it is important to share the journey to get there. Metal detecting is a game of patience and averages. The more ground you cover, and the more targets you dig, the higher your chances are of finding something juicy. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, you will invariably end up digging up rubbish. Now, this may take the form of a rolled up piece of tinfoil, perhaps a lovely 11th century dog lead, bent bits of lead, bullets, and even some unknown piece of copper thing. But Then you'll start to find slightly more exciting things, like perhaps a Victorian penny, the old gold-plated button maybe, a Civil War musket ball, and sometimes even novelty penknives from 19th century bread company marketing campaigns. Any more information on this one would be very gladly received. And if you keep digging and digging and digging, then eventually you will be rewarded with some grade A genuine treasure. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a solid silver George III half crown from 1817. This coin is over 200 years old and was minted only 40 years after the foundation of the United States of America. She may not look like that much to the untrained eye, but this coin is an absolute Bobby Dazzler, and we were over the flipping moon to find her. It just goes to show that persistence certainly pays off, which is coincidentally an adage we must be constantly reminding ourselves of during this renovation. We have seismic renovation plans for the next few months here at Duncombe House. There's no two ways about it, winter has hit our project pretty hard. But spring signals a change in our fortunes. Navigating a project like this one comes with serious amounts of complexity. Juggling contractors, conservation, planning, and potential social media collaborations of all things is more than a full-time job. But with the support of Quincy, Dean, and Borgia, Jazzy and I are certainly doing our best. The next large undertakings at Duncombe House are twofold. First, we need to repair our heating and electrical systems. After the aforementioned biblical flood, the vast majority of our electrics and plumbing were condemned. So, after a preposterous amount of head scratching, we have finally made some key decisions. JJ, our paragon of power, will be starting in a few weeks to replace all of the flood-damaged fuse boards, lighting, and sockets. At the same time, we are going to be giving our little plant room a glow-up. Our plant room, or cellar, is in a positively dismal state at present, but in the next few weeks, King Julian and I are going to be getting down there to sort her out. This will involve removing the ever so slightly dilapidated boiler we have down there presently in anticipation of our lovely new boiler arriving. This will also mean replacing the old flue and just generally giving the place a little spring clean. Now, this all has to time up together because we also need to reinstate the king pots on top of the chimney, which were taken down many moons ago. Unlike the old flue, which didn't allow for a traditional chimney pot, the new flue we are having installed will not only safely discharge the boiler fumes, but will be designed in a manner which will allow the king pot to be returned to the chimney. The second prong of our renovation pitchfork will be finishing the external decoration. Duncombe House has a significant amount of external woodwork, and on top of having over 20 sash windows, she also has intricate barge boards and 2 gorgeously convoluted bay windows. Now, these bay windows have been repaired extensively by our lovely joiners Brad and George, but still require detail filling, sanding, priming, and then painting, which may on first inspection seem like a fairly easy job, but in reality this will take weeks to complete if we want it to be done to the highest standard. So now the weather has improved, we will be once more waging our window war with the aim of getting every last spot of the external woodwork painted, ideally before our much anticipated Duncombe House summer fete. Once all this work has been completed, we will also finally be able to bring the scaffolding back down. Not only will this once more open up the west aspect of the house, but it will also hopefully stop this window, in particular, being used as an avian lavatory. Let's talk Narcissus. No, I don't mean this floppy plonker. I'm talking about the national flower of Wales. We have been furnished at Duncombe House with a stunning collection of daffodils. These resplendent little chaps pop up in early spring and have carpeted our entire paddock and orchard in gorgeous sunshine yellow. Now, beyond the fact that we think they're supercalifragilistic, our knowledge of the daffodil is embarrassingly poor. We have several species of the gorgeous little chaps across our property, and I would love someone to tell me what they are. Not only do we have the classic golden yolk fried egg, but we also have what I can only assume is an extremely rare subspecies, the fried egg after a perm. We have a few of the old mellow yellows, some terribly chic monochrome numbers, and finally this delicate little two-tone fellow. I appreciate wholeheartedly that dedicating an entire chapter, albeit a short chapter, to daffodils is a pinch odd, but they're beautiful, auspicious, and emblematic of a lovely spring to come. So please do sit back and enjoy, for a few moments at least, some daffodils. There is little point in denying that in this runaway world of technology, globalization, and artificial everything, that history and heritage have, in lots of places, become unwitting victims. It's for that reason that we are so truly blessed to live in a part of the world and amongst a thriving community which represents one of the last bastions of tradition and can boast a truly unique annual event oozing with English peculiarity. Each year on Shrove Tuesday and Ash Wednesday, thousands of Derbyshire denizens come together in our local town of Ashbourne to compete, spectate, and support the Ashbourne Royal Shrovetide football match. Shrovetide ball games have been played in England since the 11th century and are the precursor of the modern-day games of rugby and football. The Ashbourne game is now one of the last remaining and by far the most prestigious in the whole of England. Let me explain to you how all this chaos is organised. The game is played over 2 entire days, with a maximum playtime of 18 hours. There are 2 opposing teams known as the Uppards and the Downards. Whichever team has scored the most goals at the end of the 2 days is crowned the champions. Unlike in a modern game of rugby or football, a team in Shrovetide scores by getting the ball back to their own goal, which also, unlike in modern rugby or football, are 2 large mounted mill wheels, which are 3 miles away from each other at separate ends of the town. The ball is very rarely kicked at all as such. In fact, it often moves within a hug, which can be likened to a permanent rugby scrum, where both teams constantly vie for supremacy and position. The ball often moves a mere inch at a time towards its target, but can sporadically be seen flying out of the crowd and into the hands of a young runner whose job it is to break away and make a dash for the goal. All terribly exciting. The two teams are called the Uppards and the Downards. The Uppards are traditionally those town members born north of the Henmore Brook, which runs through the town. The Downards are those born south of the river. There are no limits on the amount of players in each team. The pitch, as such, is the entire town of Ashbourne. As a result, the entire town shuts down, including the shops and schools, and many of the businesses board up their doors and windows. Not because the players or spectators are in any way violent, merely because the huge force of bodies and the dogged determination to win has, in the past, been known to take the entire game through buildings. The game starts only after the assembled teams and supporters have sung Auld Lang Syne and God Save the King, at which point the ball is flung from a specially made podium in the heart of the town, a process known as turning up. After each goal, once the scoring player has been carried through the town centre, the players return to this plinth and through the same process, the carnage ensues once more. The balls themselves are incredible works of art. I say balls, plural, because the scoring player gets the privilege of keeping the ball forever as a badge of honour and pride. So each time a goal is scored and this happens, a new ball with a new bespoke painted design is produced. This year, Jazzy was very lucky to get hands on the Day 2 ball, which I'm sure you will agree is simply magnificent. The official rules of Ashbourne's Royal Shrovetide football are simple and to the point. Number 1. Committing murder or manslaughter is prohibited, and unnecessary violence is certainly frowned upon. The ball may not be carried in a motorised vehicle. The ball may not be hidden in a bag, coat, or rucksack. Cemeteries, churchyards, and the town memorial gardens are strictly out of bounds for play. Playing after 10 p.m. is forbidden. To score a goal, the ball must be tapped 3 times in the area of the goal. Now, the reason it is referred to as Ashbourne's Royal Shrovetide football is quite simple. In 1928, the then Prince of Wales, who became King Edward VIII, travelled all the way to Ashbourne specifically to turn up the ball. The game was then honoured again with royal assent in 2003, when none other than the then Prince of Wales, now King of England and head of the Commonwealth, King Charles III, was given the honour of turning up the ball. This year, Jazzy and I were privileged to have been invited to the pre-match meal, which involved some 400 local community members coming together to enjoy food, wine, prayers and songs, and to generally have a jolly good time. It's from here that the ball is carried across the town towards the aforementioned plinth, and after the aforementioned songs have been sungeth, the game can commence. This year, like every year, was a war of attrition, and after the 2 days of battle had concluded, the Downards claimed a 1-0 victory, winning Shrovetide football for the first time since 2019. It really is hard to explain or convey the electrifying atmosphere in the town of Ashbourne, not only during the match days themselves, but in the days and weeks running up to the event. The sense of community pride and tangible respect and reverence for tradition and heritage make this event a true one of a kind. Like many cultural and in many ways religious phenomena, steeped in deep history and held together by generation after generation of shared experience, Royal Ashbourne Shrovetide football deserves the utmost respect. As a result, it is important to remember that this event is and always will be a local game for for local people. And if we wish for it to continue for another 8 centuries, this is how it must remain. 2 towns that long that war had raged, being at football now engaged. For honour, as both sides pretend, let the brave trial to be ended. Till the town thaw, for they were frozen, on either part at least a dozen, with a good handsome space between 'em, like Rollerick stones if you've seen 'em, and could no more run kick, trip or yee than I can quaff a gan na pee. In this instalment of Duncombe House Interiors, we are going to be visiting what we plan on making our sitting room. Now, the 2 rooms at the front of Duncombe House are book matched, meaning we have a tough decision as to which one should become the sitting room and which one should become our formal dining room. Now, we've made this decision, in principle, almost entirely based on vibes, as we feel the energy in the southwesterly front room is simply more lounge, less dining. Like all the rooms in Duncombe House, when we first walked into this space last year, it was full of treasures. The living room at Duncombe House needs to be an ethereal sanctuary, where we can squirrel ourselves away, escaping the rigours of life in all seasons. In the winter, we want to be able to warm ourselves by a roaring fire, while we indulge in countless games of Scrabble with friends, enjoy countless glasses of bubbles, and eat countless M&S cheese straws. In the summer, it will be a place to retire to after long afternoons spent pottering in the greenhouse. A place to recline, watch reruns of The Detectorists, and read ourselves into blissful naps, soundtracked by the chirping of the birds playing in Clive's canopy. And you never know, once the house is all finished, I may finally have time to get past grade 1 on the piano, which, seeing as we have 3 at Duncombe House, would probably be a sensible thing to do. As you can see, however, we have quite a long way to go before that dream becomes a reality. The sitting room at Duncombe House measures roughly 5 metres by 5 metres, with a ceiling height of 2.8 metres, and is located in the far southwesterly corner of the property. Configuring a lounge space requires, like most things here at Duncombe House, a significant amount of head scratching. The sitting room will obviously require something to sit on. We actually inherited a rather lovely 3-piece suite when we bought Duncombe House, and although potentially it needs recovering, we do hope that we'll be able to pop it back in straight away. On top of the 3-piece suite, we inherited a very alluring plum red chaise. And as I always say, a good chaise longue is essential for optimal napping. It will also most likely be the home of our only television. We will require a table, if for no other reason than to show off how cultured we are by leaving out terribly interesting looking coffee table books. At least to start with, I predict the sitting room will remain the home of the piano, simply because we don't want to let him go, but we don't have anywhere to keep him. We hope to be getting these radiators restored, and along with a few extra ones, we should be toasty year round. We are blessed once more in this room with a rather vexing fire surround, which we will be removing in good time and replacing with a far more sympathetic and in-keeping alternative. The fireplace is, of course, an essential part of this room. Not only will it keep us warm in the winters, but in time it will also be where we hang our Christmas stockings and leave our homegrown carrots out for Rudolph. We have been persistently looking far and wide for the perfect fireplaces, but if anyone can recommend styles or retailers where we might find the perfect reclaimed match, please do comment below. Like the dining room, the office and sitting room enjoy a lovely oak hardwood floor, which will be remaining in place and hopefully will be adorned by a nice fluffy rug. The star of the show in this room is undeniably the splendiferous bay windows, which allow a cascade of golden light to flood this room from dawn until dusk, not only illuminating this space as if Ra himself was stood outside the window, but giving it a luxuriously warm aura. Perfect for napping. We have considered potentially adding some panelling to this space in line with that which is present in our rear hallway. We'd be terribly interested to know whether you thought that would look good or not. In terms of lighting, we favour wall lights over pendants as we feel they complement the room far better and provide a softer, more controllable light. So please do let us know what you would do with this room. We need your furniture suggestions, lighting ideas, colourways, and most importantly perhaps, fireplace recommendations. Help us to make this room into our very own Staffordshire Elysium. Now, on first inspection, we may not initially come across as a particularly modern pair of pickles, but when it comes to nature and the environment, we certainly try to do our bit. The general consensus is that for every tree that one chops down, one should replant 3 in its place. This will help, at least in some way, to mitigate the impacts of tree felling and help with wider carbon sequestration. Since the start of this chapter, 30 seconds ago, the equivalent of 5 entire football fields of forest have been decimated, so I'm well aware that me planting a few saplings isn't going to save the planet. But, considering how many logs we burn and trees we harvest, it certainly is the right thing to do. Now, amongst all my other varied occupations, now and again I do some commercial tree planting, and last week I actually planted over 500 trees. It just so happened that in the same week it was my birthday. So, as a lovely birthday present, the chaps gifted me a few of the leftover saplings, which I duly took back to Duncombe House to plant in the orchard and the paddock. Fortunately, our very good friends Nick and Alex, who you will remember from our singing adventure at the Bull Shed pub some weeks ago, let me keep the quad for another day, making the entire process a trailer load easier. We were also blessed to have the help of my father, aka the Master of Mirth. He was able to take a few days off from boring school children at the Milton Keynes Museum to come up and lend us a hand at the house. Now, John will be the first one to admit that he has not one practical bone in his body. I remember as a child once him going out and buying a hedge trimmer, but after cutting through the wire not once, but twice in the same outing, he largely gave up on gardening. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's save the planet and ensure lasting global economic and financial stability, shall we? If you wish to plant a tree at home, it is a very simple and enjoyable process with few tools required. It is worth noting, however, that bare root saplings like these, or whips as they're known, need to be planted between November and March when the ground is nice and moist. So you might be too late this year, but this is still all good stuff to know. In order to plant oneself a tree and ensure success, the following bits and bobs are required. you will want a spade. Now, this is a specific planting spade. Fancy, I know. But if you're only popping in a few saplings, any old spade will do in reality. And if you can't find a spade, I'm sure you could manage with an extra large serving spoon. In order to keep our freshly planted tree from blowing over in the wind and to give it some stability whilst it takes root, you're going to want a stake. Unfortunately, here in the UK, freshly planted trees are the favourite food of Peter Rabbit and his merry band of menaces. So a tree guard is essential if you don't want to come out one day and find a nibbled stump. A good dose of mulch is essential to create a lovely biodiverse area around the fledgling roots. It also stops the grass competing too aggressively and smells absolutely fabulous. I personally find the smell of mulch incredibly evocative. It immediately takes me back to the reptile house at Whipsnade Zoo as a young 10-year-old. Water is life, and your new little trees are going to be terribly thirsty whilst they're finding their feet in the world. So a healthy slosh of the good stuff is another essential element to success. Lastly, but obviously by no means least, you will require some actual trees. Now, trees are famously good at growing. So deciding the species to plant for the space you have is essential. To be perfectly honest with you, today we are planting whatever I was given, but please, on this one, do as I say, not as I do. Today we're going to be dropping in 9 lovely new trees. First up, we have 2 hornbeam, or Carpinus betulus, a gnarly and tough little tree which will provide an excellent winter hideout for all our wildlife. Next up, it's 2 beech, or Fagus sylvatica, known in England as the Queen of Trees, and a very similar species to our very own Clive. Finally, we're planting 2 alder, or Altus glutinosa, a thirsty little tree that loves a drink and will add great texture to our garden. Step 1. It's time to create a little hole for our lovely new tree to call home. Now, if you do have a planting spade, let me show you a clever little trick. What you need to do is cut a T shape in the ground and then lever it open to create a space for the roots. In reality, however, as long as the root system is underground and well secured, you will be fine, whichever technique you decide to use. Next up, it's time to protect our budding little tree beard from those aforementioned maniacal bunny rabbits, and depending on where you live, from Bambi and his band of ruddy ruminants. If you do happen to have a spare retiree, this is the moment to deploy them, as sheathing your new sapling is far easier done with the benefit of 4 hands. As if on cue, John perfectly displayed why he isn't the best person to give tools to. So, after taking the hammer back and whacking in the stake, it's time to nip up the ties, ensuring the guard goes all the way to the deck. A little splash of water at this stage will certainly put a smile on your Fagus sylvatica's face, and then a gorgeous helping of mulch. As I mentioned, giving your new addition to the family the very best chance of thriving. One more generous slosh of H2O, and voila! We are saving the planet, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned in our tree felling chapter, we don't really plant trees for ourselves. We don't even really plant them for our children. We plant trees for our grandchildren and their grandchildren. This Fagus sylvatica, for example, could happily live for 300 to 400 years. Just imagine, for a moment, what this place might look like in 2400. It really does boggle one's mind. Will us humans even still be here? Or will the planet have been taken over by some bothersome and obnoxious AI robots? Selfishly, of course, I very much hope that our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will be happily frolicking about on the lawn. I guess we will never know. We are extremely fortunate at Duncombe House to have a seemingly endless repository of social history. We try our best to share this with you all through our Treasure Tuesday series, where each week we pick out yet another interesting item from our veritable museum to look at in a little more detail. We thought it might be fun to have a peruse of some of the items we have found in the house in a little more detail and share our attempts at restoring and reintroducing them to everyday use. Picture the BBC television show The Repair Shop, without the budget or artisanal skill. Today we wanted to share with you a couple of our favourite finds from the last few weeks, both of which we had hoped would make excellent additions to our Duncombe House summer fete. One we managed to restore perfectly, the other is destined for the skip. We found this box full of lanterns in our walk-in fridge of all places, tucked away underneath the game larder. Of course, the idea of using paraffin for light is very antiquated, but I'm sure you will agree it also certainly has its charms. And considering we live in the middle of nowhere, having a reliable alternative source of lighting in the future certainly wouldn't go amiss. Time to get into the workshop, I think, and see if we can get these lovely little lanterns burning once more. We also spied a few weeks ago these interesting looking director's chairs tucked right in the back corner of the wash house. Now, our first thought was that these could be perfect for parking bums on at the summer fete, and having looked to buy new ones could also save us a pretty penny. After moving all sorts of nonsense to get to them, we pulled them all out so that we could have a better look and, most importantly, have a little sit on them. Now, I'm no expert, but I'm fairly sure this is not indicative of structural stability, but there really is only one way to find out. Now, I know we should be spending every waking hour working specifically on the house, but at the same time, we both want to enjoy this wild old journey. And the wider Duncombe House picture involves far more than just renovating our lovely home. So we shan't feel guilty for a few hours here and there tinkering. Plus, of course, we want to share all this fun with you lovely people. We found 3 distinct pairs of lamps in this box, 2 delicate glass oil lamps, 2 English-made long-handled hurricanes, and 2 monstrous Czechoslovakian hurricane lamps. Now, oil lamps are ludicrously simple bits of kit really. They work by lighting an oil-soaked wick, which can then be controlled using this little dial, increasing or reducing the wick's protrusion. I was all ready to replace all the wicks, but the vast majority of them were absolutely fine. I did, however, refresh all the paraffin to make sure that they burned nice and cleanly, but other than that, after a quick clean, they were ready to go. Now, of course, working in the daylight is all very well and good, but the real test is whether or not they still work in the dark. So I packed them off to the tool shed, shut myself in, and set up the experiment. We were very fortunate to have excellent weather for our director chair trial run, and there were far more than we'd first assumed. We even found a bonus deck chair, which really only needed a good clean before it was as good as new. Unfortunately, like the waders Jazzy tested in our Treasure Tuesday some weeks ago, I was in fact too fat to fit in these chairs, which meant it fell once more to Jazzy to test them out. Now, no one can accuse us of being frivolous or throwaway when it comes to the treasures we are finding here at Duncombe House. We bought a shipping container, for goodness sake, just because we are so foolishly romantic about keeping things, and usually live by the mantra that one man's trash is another man's treasure. But sadly, I don't think anyone would consider these chairs to be salvageable treasure. Fortunately, however, what we lost in chairs, we certainly made up for in oil lamps. I can't imagine that these badgers will have been lit for decades at the very least, and with minimal restoration, they are working perfectly. Now, who is going to be the first person to decipher this Morse code? If I've said it once, I've said it 7 or 9 times. They simply don't make things like they used to. Like humans, animals are equally excited when spring starts. Quincy certainly enjoys a little sun on her back and is a huge fan of a daffodil. Dean and Borgia have well and truly taken over the place this spring. It's bonkers to think that they've only been with us here at Duncombe House since October. When you see something every day, it's natural not to notice it growing, but goodness gracious, these two have sprung up, not just in size, but in their confidence. They're in their absolute element up at the house, roaming around in the garden, basking on the lawn and generally keeping everything in check. Not all creatures are welcome here, unfortunately. I have no particular malice towards Mole, but I do have an aversion to him making molehills right outside the front of the house. Luckily, it appears that Borgia is already on the case, and I'm sure before we know it, he will have calmly negotiated a cease and desist, ideally well before the summer fete. Spring has also brought the most wonderful of all nature's infants to Jazz's mother's house. 12 little ducklings in total suddenly appeared one day last week on the pond, and they are absolutely adorable. Our neighbours have also recently acquired some peacocks, which seem to have very little interest in staying next door. They really are quite peculiar creatures. I'd liken them somewhat to big blue turkeys, and although they can be disconcertingly confident at times, they certainly add a certain je ne sais quoi to the garden. If any of you have had peacocks in the past, we'd love to hear your experiences. We were thinking of getting some white ducks and geese at Duncombe House, for no other reason than we love Beatrix Potter, but now we're thinking that perhaps a few peacocks might also go well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again from the bottom of our hearts for joining us here at Duncombe House Diaries. If you've enjoyed our special brand of nonsense, please let me implore you to support us by subscribing to our channel so that you never miss out on our fatuous updates. And please, if you do have the time, come and join us downstairs in the comments. Have any of you been to Shrovetide? Can anyone shed any light on that funny little penknife I found? Do you think some panelling might look good in the lounge? Perhaps now you've seen her in more detail, you've got some even better name suggestions for our other one. And do any of you have any rays of knowledge on peacocks? Please do remember at all times that we are here to entertain you. So if there's anything in particular you would like us to cover, any areas of the house you would like to see in more detail, or anything at all that you would like to know about our funny little life, please do simply ask downstairs. Let us wish you the jolliest of springtimes, and we hope you have a fabulous April. We will be back in 4 weeks' time, but until then, All that's left to say, my dear friends, is TTFN.